Hi everybody. This is all very new to me, so don't expect anything ridiculously fantastic or anything because I'm just getting used to this whole platform. But yeah, so we've got a few people online already, which is really nice. If somebody could just let me know that you can see everything and you can hear me properly, then that would be absolutely fantastic. Oh, thanks, the Yeti. Thank you for letting me know it's all good. And hi, Scorpio Design. Hi, nice to see you. I've got a couple of your questions, which I'll get to a little bit later. Hi, George. Nice to see you as well. All good. We've got some good names that I can recognize straight away. That's really awesome. Yeah, so maybe I'll just let you know a little bit what I've had going on for the last little while and what I've got planned coming up for the future. So here in New Zealand, we've been at level 2, I think has it just been a week now? I think it's just been a week. And level 2 for us basically means that we're now allowed to get out into the backcountry and go on overnight hikes, which we weren't allowed to do before under level 3. So yeah, it's kind of exciting, but at the same time, it's a little bit annoying because obviously we're in the middle of our winter now. So the weather is getting a little bit worse and the temperatures are getting a little bit colder. And I know that some of the people who weren't able to finish Te Araroa before the lockdown came into effect, quite a few of them have headed back to the trail. And they will be picking up from where they left off. And yeah, but it looks like the weather is taking a turn for the worse. So I'm just hoping that they're all going to be okay and they're going to stay safe out there. And I'm just really happy that they're able to carry on and hopefully they all get to the finish. So I'm wishing all of those people well at the moment. And yeah, sort of plans for me for the next little while. Ideally, well, let's backtrack a little bit. So obviously COVID. So before, like when I got off Te Araroa and when I was thinking about what I was going to be doing for the rest of the year, I sort of had 2 main goals in mind. The first obviously was to go back and fill in all of the sections that I didn't complete when I was hiking down the North Island before. So I have, I think it's about 400 odd kilometers to actually fill in, which sounds like quite a lot, but it's different sections all over the place. And so my plan for this year was to go and start filling in some of those sort of more difficult to reach sections so that I could, when I eventually go back to start the South Island, I could just do the Ratia Forest section or just the Northland Forest section and then also the Tararuas. Basically immediately before I go down to the South Island to warm my legs up and hopefully get my trail legs back a little bit before I hit the Richmond Ranges on the South Island. So yeah, but now, like I said, we're sort of going into winter and I've got, you know, a part-time job or sort of full-time job that I have to go to now, and I don't really have all the leave benefits that I would otherwise want. So I'm just trying to figure out how I might be able to go and do most of those sections before I plan on heading up there to start making my way back down again towards the end of this year. But the plan is still to get back onto the South Island, ideally as close to the start of January as possible, and to continue hiking south and reach Bluff hopefully within a couple of months. But also, sort of as training for that, I also want to start ticking off some of the great walks that we have here in New Zealand. So if you're not a Kiwi, I know lots of you are, but if you're not, then we do have a series of what we call great walks here in New Zealand. And these are sort of the best multi-day tramps, or what the Department of Conservation has termed the best multi-day tramps. Very popular with tourists, also very popular with Kiwis. And they're generally through some pretty awesome scenic remote areas. So I think there's 9 of them, or maybe there's 10 now because they just added another one last year. And I just want to start making my way through them and obviously videoing them for you guys so that you can see what they're like, and putting them into a great walk video series up on my channel. So that's what I was going to start looking at doing before the lockdown, I had actually booked to go and do the Lake Waikaremoana Moana Great Walk, which is just sort of a hop, skip and a jump over the hills from me. And I had to cancel that because we were in lockdown. So I'm planning on going to do that sometime, maybe on the other side of winter, because it will be a bit milder then. And then also the Tongariro Northern Circuit, which basically goes around the national park area that I'm used to walking in anyway. Okay, right, let's start working the way through some of these. So I had a guy called Peter contact me who asked me, how did my family cope with my absence when I was on Te Araroa? That's kind of a really difficult question to ask, actually, to answer, because obviously I don't really know. The thing about through hiking is, and maybe this is why I like it so much, but it's that it's quite a selfish exercise. And, you know, for the 80 days that I was on the trail, really all I was ever thinking about was myself. And that's just the reality of it. And, you know, I think we're kind of encouraged to not think about ourselves so much and to think about other people. And of course, you know, that's generally how we should try to live our lives. But when you're out there doing this big thing, it really is an incredibly selfish exercise. And so I probably didn't sort of touch base with my family about how they felt about what I was doing too much. But, you know, I'm incredibly lucky to have a very, very supportive family. And I mean, you guys will have probably gotten a little bit of an inkling just from watching my videos about how much my parents in particular supported my journey. It was amazing to have Dad come with me on that Wanganui River section. And, you know, we had an excellent time. And I think for me, like, it was an excellent bonding experience with him, even though we're quite close anyway. But then also behind the scenes, the stuff that you guys didn't see was the amount of work and effort that Mum put into supporting me. And like, let's be honest, if she hadn't have been doing that, my hike just wouldn't have happened. So I'm so, like, grateful doesn't even cut it. There should be another word, because yeah, it just wouldn't have happened without Mum. She was there. You know, I would often give her less than 12 hours notice that I needed a box to be sent, because I'm not a particularly organized person. and it would be there waiting for me every single time when I got to wherever it was supposed to be. And that was just amazing. So I think it was probably, like, if I think about it rationally from a parent perspective, I guess it was pretty hard for them to see me go out there and do something that, like, I'd never really shown any proclivity, is that the right word? Proclivity for in the past. And to be out there doing it completely alone and just trying to have that experience and be safe at the same time. But I made sure, this was one of the reasons why I wanted to get the Garmin GPS, because I made sure to keep them updated every single day. Every single day I got to camp, I would send them a message so that they knew I was safe. And I think probably that really helped. And my sister, well, she doesn't live with me anyway, so I don't even think she's watched any of the videos. So yeah. We got a question here from John. Hi, John. Nice to see you. Okay, what have you learned hiking the North Island that you can apply to hiking the South Island? Gosh, I suppose if I knew that, it would be really good, wouldn't it? I think, okay, so one of the biggest lessons that I took away from the North Island was how much mentally and physically I can take. I think one of the places where that really hit me was basically right at the end of the North Island when I got to the Paikakariki escarpment track. And I was going up this, hill, and the track itself is very exposed. It's quite narrow. It's it's sort of dirt, but it's not really dirt. It's like that very fine, gritty dirt. And like every time I put my feet down, they would slide out from under me. And of course the track is slightly cambered, and it's cambered the wrong way down the hill to what seemed like imminent death down below. And I just remember like turning the corner at the top and standing at the top of this staircase, which just seemed like it went straight down into the bowels of the earth, and thinking to myself, like, I have to get down here. there's no other thing that I can do. I can't turn back, because if I turn back, I still have to go down steps the other side. So I might as well carry on going forward. And I sort of willed myself to go forward. I really wanted to like keep sitting down on these steps to take a breather and, and try and get myself back into the right headspace. But when I got to the end of that track, like there was this real sort of pin drop moment where I realized that how far I had come by just pushing myself to do things that otherwise I might have took one look at and just shied away from. So I think that that is a really big lesson that I learned on the North Island, which is that actually I can do a lot of stuff that I think I can't do. And in particular, I think that's going to be very helpful on the Richmond Ranges section and through the Nelson Lakes, because those are probably the two biggest areas that I am worried about at the moment. And probably, if I'm completely honest, those are the two biggest areas that at the moment I'm trying to see whether there are sort of escape routes for me, so that if I get to certain sections and I just don't feel like I can carry on anymore, at least I have a route out. And I suppose the other thing that I probably took away from the North Island is just to never or always expect the trail to be worse than it is. Because it's been like I couldn't really get my head around the fact that the trail was as bad as it was in some sections. And like, okay, if you're a seasoned New Zealand Kiwi tramper, you know that it's going to be like that. Like, you know that you're just going to go straight up a hill rather than go up in nice, lovely switchbacks. And you know this. I sort of just assumed that it was going to be like that the whole way down. And of course it wasn't, because hello, hey presto, you'll know if you've read the trail notes that a lot of it goes through private land. And so you're completely dependent on those private landowners to maintain the trail. And, you know, a lot of them don't. I mean, they're not getting paid for it, obviously. And it's sort of just been done out of the goodness of their hearts. And of course, you know, not all of them are as passionate about having something like the Te Araroa going through their land as others are. So yeah, I'd say that if I had to pick two big lessons, that would probably be it. So I hope that answered your question, John. Hi, Darren. Nice to see you. Oh my goodness, I've got so many of my patrons on here. This is amazing. And like, you know, I do have to say a massive thank you to my patrons. Again, you know, outside of Mum, I really couldn't have done that hike without you guys, you know, and I've just been so incredibly blown away by the generosity of complete strangers. Like I really have. I still can't believe that little old me, who 18 months ago didn't really know what the heck she was talking about, and probably still doesn't, to be honest, you know, has all these people actually fronting up to support me, and it's been amazing. And you know, I don't know if you know how Patreon works, but basically you can create levels of support that people want to provide for you, and generally it's monetary support. And like I give things back in return for each of those different levels. So for example, at the most base level, you generally get some sort of a thank you note from me. Actually, I just got my postcards. Oh, let me show you. Because if you're a patron and you haven't checked your mail just lately, then you can expect to receive some of these soon. And I'm super excited about them because they came out so great. This is what I'll be sending to my patrons. That's probably back to front, but it says thank you. That's the Paikakariki Escarpment track. There you go. So yeah, I send one of these to all of my patrons who sign up at that lower level, and if you sign up at a higher level too. And then they also get access to these Q&As, which hopefully I'll start hosting on a monthly basis for them. And then it sort of just progresses up from there. And right at the sort of highest level, I'm actually giving those patrons a free Long White Gypsy t-shirt, and I've just managed to get my act into gear and actually sort those. So keep an eye on my website, because I'm coming out with t-shirt designs at the moment, and there are going to be some t-shirts and things for sale. The latest one I did is quite a cool little picture of a pair of hiking boots, and it's got a neat little slogan that goes with it. So you can keep an eye out for that. Hi, Christian. Nice to see you. I'm about to finish the TA in 2 days. Wow, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you've been able to finish. That's really cool. You're at Coal Lake Bay. Awesome. I can't wait to get down there. So a lot of these places on the South Island, like you're going to tell me where you are, and I'm not going to have a clue where it is because I haven't walked through them yet, but I roughly know where Coal Lake Bay is. And you're stuck in New Zealand. Oh, that's so sad. I guess recommendations for hikes in the winter. Now, I suppose it depends on whether or not you're planning on staying on the South Island or if you're planning on coming back up to the north. And like, I'll be completely upfront with you, even though I would love to get hiking down in the south, I'm not as familiar with the trails and things down there as I am up here. I'd probably say that you try and find them in coastal areas more than in the mountains at this time of year, because you're going to be facing some pretty harsh weather down there. In fact, I saw some video earlier from somebody who's just gotten back on the trail in the last, couple of weeks, and I think they were up at Waiohut Hut, which is still pretty close to the top of the North Island, and yeah, snow about this thick at Waiohut Hut. So I hope that person can finish their hike, but I just don't know that that's going to happen. So yeah, maybe Christian, if you stick a little bit more to the coastal areas, I mean, the West Coast might even be a good place to go and hike a little bit during the winter. It will be really wet, and you will have to be a little bit conscious about flooding, because they do tend to flood a lot over on the West Coast in winter. But I don't think it would be quite as cold as, say, for example, going up into the Southern Alps and things at this time of year. But if you're doing day hikes and things, then I would say get yourself to either the Tekapo region or the Mount Cook region and go and do some hikes around there. Mueller Hut is a great hut to go and overnight at in the winter, provided there's not too much snow on the track. It's one of the, in fact, it has been rated the best hut in New Zealand. That's the lovely red one that sits in the Mount Cook Valley, and you get some beautiful sunrises from there. So if I had a choice, that's where I'd be going, that's for sure, if the weather was good enough. Okay, so what else have we got? So I had a question from Scorpio Designs. I think is it Brian, if I got that name right? I'll answer one of your older ones. I see you just posted another one there, but you were asking me about international travelers, whether I could recommend a New Zealand cell phone and a data plan or a subscription with decent coverage on the trail. So I think the thing to say is that it doesn't really matter which company you go with, because there's generally only three companies that own cell phone towers in New Zealand. And I think that's Vodafone, 2 Degrees, and they call themselves Spark now. And the other cell phone companies will just rent towers off of them, basically. So I would say any of them, any of those three companies, you've probably got as much chance of getting good coverage over New Zealand as you have with any of them. But there are obviously going to be areas where you're not going to get good cell phone coverage. And on the North Island, I would say that I was expecting to be out of cell phone coverage a lot more often than I was. And I'm on the 2 Degrees network, and I found that they were pretty good. There were other TA hikers who I came across who had bought New Zealand 2 Degrees SIM cards, and they reckoned that they just weren't getting very good coverage at all. So I don't really know. I don't know how that works, but certainly I never really had too many issues. Often I would lose cell phone coverage in areas where I wasn't expecting it. Like one of the strangest places I didn't have cell phone coverage was between Te Kuiti and the start of the Timber Trail. It's just this random 2-day road walking section, which was absolute hell for me, quite frankly. Probably my worst day on the trail. But I didn't have any cell phone coverage through that area at all, which was really strange. So, I mean, obviously, if you're going into a wilderness type area like a forest section, or, on the Timber Trail or down the Wanganui River, you're not going to get cell phone coverage. But yeah, for most of the time going through the sort of towns and things, I definitely did. Now, on the South Island, you're spending an awful lot of time in those wilderness areas well out of any kind of cell phone coverage. So it's really not going to matter which network that you're with. Vodafone tends to be the more expensive of the lot. And with that, I think people expect that they're going to get better coverage and they're going to get more data and they're going to get more minutes and things. But historically, my experience with Vodafone has been that they're just not worth it. Okay, you might get that better coverage and you might get that better data, but their support is terrible and you're generally paying them through the nose for it. Skinny, I've heard really good things about. So I would suggest maybe trying with a Skinny plan because they have some pretty good data deals. They have some good minutes. You get quite a few text messages and things. So you might want to try starting off with Skinny, and then if that doesn't work, maybe switch to 2 Degrees or even Spark, because some of their plans are pretty good. But I don't think it's the same as, like, for example, in the US, or even vaguely from what I can recall of getting cell phone plans in England, where often there's quite a bit of discrepancy between pricing and what you'll get on the plan. In New Zealand, you can basically go to any one of the cell phone companies and generally you're paying the same price for the same sort of data, the same sort of minute. It doesn't really matter. So, but yeah, I'd check either of those two out. Okay. Oh, I need a drink. I'm talking too much. Okay. We've got Syncopator, New Zealand. When are you getting back on the Te Araroa? So I did talk about this a little bit earlier, but I don't know if you were already online. So I'm looking at getting back on trail at the start of January next year. It's looking like I'm probably going to have Christmas in Christchurch maybe, which makes things a little bit difficult. Yeah, I'm still working out logistics, but all things being equal, my plan is to start as close to the start of January as possible. So. And Scorpio Designs, again, our ticks are a problem in New Zealand. Do you know what? I don't even know if we have ticks. I think we do have ticks here. But yeah, no is the simple answer to that. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody getting bitten by a tick whilst they're out on trail. I think, you know, like dogs can pick them up and things, but I have never heard of it. So I can look into it and let you know if it's a thing for trampers, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Yeah, there you go. Never had to deal with ticks in New Zealand. Yeah. That's what I thought. Thank you so much, Aidan. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff that I don't know. Let's not expect me to be an expert on everything. What dehydrated meals did I make on the trail? This was a question from a lady, and I can't remember who it was who asked it, but I'm sorry. If you ask the question, then I will get it. It might have been Robin. So I had 3 different types of meals that I made. So the reason why I only chose 3 and I didn't give myself more variety was because I knew that I was going to have to make big or large quantities of these things, and I didn't want to create too much work for myself because I was a little bit worried about the spoil factor and how long these meals were going to keep for. So I wanted to make sure that I was preparing them and dehydrating them as close to my departure date as possible. So I picked 3 different recipes. So one of them was just a mushroom risotto. So I found a nice mushroom risotto recipe online and made up a couple of batches of that and just progressively sort of dehydrated it. It did take a little bit longer to dehydrate the risotto than it did my other meals. And the reason why is that when you are preparing dehydrated meals, which I did read beforehand, but I didn't really think much of it. But when you're preparing dehydrated meals, you have to, like, it's a good idea if you don't have a very high oil content. So the higher the oil, higher the, I guess just oil. The higher the oil content is in the food, then the harder it will be to dehydrate it, right? Because oil is a slick substance. It's not necessarily something that would evaporate naturally. So I did struggle a little bit with dehydrating that because of the fact that it was quite oily, which is a shame because I love to have risotto when I'm out tramping or hiking. But yeah, it's just one of those things that I probably would do differently next time. And then the second meal that I had was a vegetarian spaghetti bolognese. So That one, I just made like a big batch of the vegetarian bolognese mix, and the main base for that was lentils. So I didn't want to dehydrate my own beef because I was a little bit worried about that, and I knew that potentially it could spoil faster. So I just went with a lentil mix instead, and that worked out really well. It was really tasty. I loved it. And it was, one of my favorite meals on the trail. And then I just dehydrated a bunch of spaghetti or pasta as well. And that was quite easy to do because I'd make the bolognese mix in one sitting, and then I would make the pasta mix in another sitting and just dehydrate them separately and then put them all together afterwards, when I was packaging everything up. So that worked out really well. And then the last meal that I had was like a Mexican beef and beans and rice dish. And I actually picked up that recipe from backpackingchef.com. If you haven't checked that out already, I would highly recommend you go and take a look because he has some amazing recipes on there. And so, yeah, I mean, and I would really recommend dehydrating your own meals if you can, because not only is it cheaper, but also you can pack them full of vegetables and just try and get a few more nutrients and things into them, because otherwise you're just eating things that are probably not particularly great for you, especially when you think about Te Araroa and the fact that you don't really have an awful lot of choice at the resupply stops along the way. And I preferred the knowledge of knowing that I already had those nutrients in the meals. And if I wanted to, I could just pop into a small supermarket or a dairy or a big supermarket if there was one in the town where I was, and I could just put things like broccoli and spinach and, all those green vegetables that I was missing into the meals at that time. So yeah, that was what I did. And I think that lady also asked me a question. She said, which was the compostable bags that I used on the trail? So I think it took me a little while, but I used a website called friendlypak.co.nz. It's friendlypak.co.nz. And on there, underneath their bag section, they have a listing for Ziploc bags. They're not technically Ziploc bags because they don't have a slider, but they've got sort of one of those pinch to close closings on the top, and they are completely compostable. So I used those. And when I was done with them, I posted them back home so that I could compost them. So my art call. I don't know if any of you watched the art call review video yet, but I did talk a little bit about the art call. This guy, Metro on the Move, asked me a little bit earlier today whether I'd had any leaks in the art call on the trail. So I did talk about that a little bit in the video today. The only place that I really noticed the pack, and I wouldn't say leaking, but where I noticed water getting into the pack was after I finished up on or after I crossed the Turakina River just south of Wanganui. And that was because I decided to use it as a raft and float across the river. So actually I was looking at it today, and I think that potentially the way that the water got in was through the hydration porthole in the back. I think that's probably what happened. Because, like I said, I had issues with the pack, the frame twisting, and I think that because the frame twisted, it potentially made a little bit more of a gap for water to get in. And so once I was lying on top of the pack in the water, it was obviously just getting in that way. And so that was the issue there. But apart from that, I had no issues whatsoever, and I did cross a couple of estuaries with my pack on my back as opposed to trying to carry it over on top of my head. And so the bottom of the pack would have been in the water, and I never noticed that it was wet inside after that. And I did also have a couple of days where there was some pretty torrential rain while I was hiking, and the worst that happened was just that the pack got a little bit damp inside. But because I was using a pack liner, it wasn't really a problem for me. So hopefully that answers that question. Okay. The Yeti asks, how hard was it to navigate the North Island? Well, that depends on what you're using to navigate. I would not recommend, if you have an iPhone, I would not recommend the Te Araroa app. It was more hassle than it was worth in some areas, and particularly where I was walking through urban areas like Auckland, it was very, very difficult to see where I was and where I needed to go. I think the experience with the TA app is different if you're running Android or a Google phone or something like that. Because I noticed on some of my fellow hikers who were using the app on those kinds of phones, they actually had like different color coded sections. So for example, if it was a section through or along a river, it would be in blue. And there was like a purple section for something else. And for the most part, the trail was red. I think it was red. Anyway, it was color coded. So you sort of knew roughly what kind of terrain you were looking at heading in. And then sometimes I think they would also have alternates on that route as well. Like for example, if you don't want to do the kayak from Paihia through to Waikari up in the north of the North Island, there is a road walking alternate, which is what I ended up doing. But on the TA app, that alternate was not shown at all. So it was a good job I was with Julia, because at that point we were using her Maps.me app, and that's how we were basically navigating. So I would say if you want to minimize the opportunities for you to get lost and not be able to find the trail, then I would use something slightly different. And in hindsight, I should have just splashed out the $50 or whatever it was to get Guthook right from the start, because as soon as I purchased that, which was after my 2 horrible days outside of Te Koiti, I just found it infinitely easier. You can download all the maps offline, which you can do in the TA app, but the difference was that when I zoomed in on the maps on Guthook, I could actually still see the topo maps, whereas when I did that on the TA app, I could zoom in so far, but then the map would just disappear, even though I had pre-downloaded it. So that was really annoying, not being able to see surrounding features and things. But then, of course, with Guthook as well, you've got all the different comments, you've got accommodation options, which you do have on the TA app as well, but there are just more of them in Guthook. And if you've used Guthook for previous hikes and things overseas, maybe on some of the long distance American trails, you'll be familiar with the fact that it's quite established, and so there's some really awesome information about everything you need to know. But on Te Araroa, obviously, it's still quite new, and so Guthook isn't quite as well established yet. Like I noticed in a lot of the cases, if I was looking at the upcoming section for the day and checking the comments under the various different features and water sources and things, sometimes there would be comments still there from like 2015 or whatever, and that would be the most recent comment on that water source, just because people aren't really using it quite as much on Te Araroa at the moment, and they're still getting used to it. So yeah, but I would definitely recommend it. The actual signage on the trail is a little bit problematic at some times. Because each section of the trail goes through different regions in New Zealand, they all fall under the authority of different councils, and each council approaches the trail in a different way. So, for example, when we were walking through I think it was the Whangarei district, there were Te Araroa signs everywhere. So you would be doing a road walking section, and you basically wouldn't have to look at your map, because you knew that if you needed to take a left-hand or a right-hand turning onto a different road, there'd be a lovely little sign up on the road sign that says Te Araroa this way. And it was wonderful. But there were other areas where there was just nothing like that. And, you'd quite often find yourself walking off in the completely wrong direction because there weren't any actual markers. So, it's not like the Appalachian Trail, it's not like the Pacific Crest Trail where you're following blazes. It really is you need to be checking on a regular basis that you're on the right path. On the South Island, I'm imagining this experience is going to be a lot different, because like I said, it's mainly through wilderness areas, and so in those areas you're going to be following some sort of a track, which will be marked either by orange triangles or orange triangles on top of a pole, or potentially even a cairn, although we don't really use cairns in New Zealand. So, but that's only because it's over public conservation land, and so it's all managed by DOC. If you're in an area that's not managed by DOC, or you're on a road walk, you're sort of at the mercy of, like I said, the local council to put signs up to let you know where to go. But yeah, I mean, in general, wasn't too difficult. And I certainly didn't end up going completely off trail anywhere, unlike one of my hiking companions who that one particular day ended up walking 6 or 7 kilometers further than he needed to because he'd failed to turn off of the beach when he was supposed to, and ended up walking another 3 or 4 kilometers down the beach before he realized what he'd done. So, and I just remember thinking that was awful because that was one of the worst beaches I'd walked along, and I couldn't have done another 3 or 4 kilometers. So, oh dear, great news about the ticks. The tick situation is getting worse. Oh, yeah, I don't know what it must be like to have to deal with ticks. I guess I'd probably find that out if and when I get onto the PCT eventually. Rob Cleary. Hi, Rob. I've seen your name on a few comments too. Nice to meet you. Now you're more confident, and with COVID in mind, are you looking at doing any of the Australian trails, the Hayson in South Australia, which is 1,200 kilometres, or the Bicentennial on the East Coast, 5,300? Wow. I didn't even know about that one. Where does that go from and to? That would be really interesting. The answer to that is yes. Yes, I would love to go over to Australia and do some trails over there. Probably the first one I was looking at doing, which is quite popular, obviously, is the Overland Track. So I would love to go and give that a go. But yeah, I mean, any trail over there would be fantastic. I'm not a particularly great flyer. Like, if you watch some of the earlier videos on my channel, you'll know that I just don't fly well at all. So even, doing things like flying down to the South Island to go and do a bit of hiking down there is a big deal for me. So if I was to go and do an Australian trail like that, I'd probably want to try and squeeze in like maybe 1 or 2 at once. But yeah, I'd like long distance trails like that. That's fantastic. And the Hayson sounds fantastic because it's 1,200 Ks, and that's doable within a decent amount of time without having to take too much time off of work. So, and I guess, that's the biggest thing, isn't it? It's how much time off can you take to do some of this stuff? And, we're not all lucky or fortunate enough to be able to take long periods of time off. So I'd have to put the money aside, obviously, first, and then go and do that. The problem is that, I've got plans for what I want to do after Te Araroa, and a lot of that is going to take up funds and things too. So, and I'd rather do those things first before I started exploring the backyard. It would be good though, wouldn't it? It would be good to just go and do some training over there. And I think maybe it's one of those things that I could leave until maybe I'm a little older, maybe when travel doesn't come quite so easily and I can't bounce back from jet lag very quickly, and maybe I just want to go to Australia for a couple of months and go and travel around there. Funnily enough though, the whole snake and creepy crawly thing doesn't really bother me so much about hiking in Australia. Maybe that would change after the first night of having a snake crawl over my tent or something. I don't know. I don't know. Oh dear, Aiden. Yeah, no, main concern in New Zealand would be sandflies and mosquitoes. Amen to that. Absolutely. Actually, that's a good point because I don't really struggle at all on the North Island with sandflies and mosquitoes. And I think, a lot of that is to do with the fact that the areas that you're walking through just really aren't areas where they would normally accumulate anyway. But having said that, down the Wanganui River, where you're told that the sandfly situation is pretty bad, I mean, yes, we would sit at camp at night time and I would start to get bitten, and it wasn't particularly great. But generally, I could put on a pair of long pants and a long shirt, and the only places that would get bitten were right around my ankles and and around my wrists and things because they go straight for the veins, don't they? Mosquitoes, not so much. And I think, that's one of the differences between Te Araroa and the American trails. Not that we don't not have mosquitoes here, we do. And I'm sure that, again, on the South Island, they are way worse. Maybe some of you who've been down there and have done the South Island can comment on that. But yeah, mainly it's just the sandflies. And they get you at the most least expecting moments as well. Like you think you're safe and then all of a sudden, bang. So, and I've heard awful stories of clouds of sandflies attacking people's tents. And yeah, it doesn't sound like fun because they give you a nasty bite too. Like if you've never had a sandfly bite before, it's not like a mosquito bite. It doesn't sort of come up in that lump with all the venom and poison and toxin and whatever it is under the surface of the skin. It's just a little bite, but oh my gosh, do they itch. And they just come up in a red sort of spot, I guess. And you'll just be absolutely covered in them. And some of them you might not even notice they're biting you until later when you see the little spots. But yeah, they just itch and itch and itch and itch. Like mosquitoes, you'll itch them and scratch them for a day, maybe not even a day, and then they're fine. But with sandfly bites, it can go on for ages. So, okay. Oh, Rob, Hasten is the Flinders Ranges and Bicentennial is North Queensland to Melbourne, inland and along the coast. Wow. Now that's kind of appealing. I kind of like the idea of that. Because I like that coast. It's and I suppose, if it's not too far away from sort of the main centres and things, you could get off occasionally because I haven't done a lot of tourism stuff in Australia. And I haven't been up to Queensland since I was very, very young. So yeah, maybe that's a good way to see a little bit more of Australia. My uncle lives in Melbourne too, so it'd be a good place to finish up maybe. Do I carry on walking southbound though, or do I switch it up and try and go northbound? Who knows? Darren, today I found myself looking at no track and no markers as the windfall had scattered bits of tree everywhere, and it was usually the tree with the marker on it. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I feel you. I totally feel you, Darren. There were sections like that on Te Araroa too. In fact, I think it was through the Hakarimata walkway just north of Ngaruahia. I noticed there were a lot of trees down with the markers on them. How is it that they know which trees or how is it that the wind knows which trees to take down? It's just awful. And you don't even realize until you're in that environment. It's sometimes scary enough walking through those forested areas, even when it's well marked with triangles. But, if you miss one of those triangles out, sometimes it can be a real mission to find the next one. And of course, Department of Conservation and all the volunteers who put these up, they do put them at certain distances from each other so that, in the worst conditions, you are still able to see them. But yeah, it's amazing how much difference just taking one of those markers away really makes. And through the forested sections in particular, it can be quite unnerving. And I think, this is why so many people end up getting lost, probably especially in Rātia Forest as well, because it's obviously the first forest that you hit on Te Araroa. It's the first time that you have to follow orange triangles like that. And if you're not familiar with following tracks like that, luckily I sort of am because I've been hiking in New Zealand for a couple of years now. But if you're not, and it's a completely foreign concept to you, then yeah, it can be pretty daunting. So good on you for managing to find your way back home, Darren. I mean, you're super experienced anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But Rob, how much has your self-confidence improved since starting TA last year? Oh gosh, that's a good question. How do you answer that without sounding arrogant? No. I think it has improved immensely. But what I would say, one of the things that I noticed, maybe I should give some backstory, but obviously when I started off, I was completely a novice. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was doing it because, you know, I wanted to try and get myself out of this anxious rut a little bit. I mean, I'd already done quite a lot of work towards that anyway, but I wanted to do something completely out of my comfort zone, something that I definitely would have run away from, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And I wanted to just do something that was so different that it would undoubtedly make me very anxious. And I sort of was really surprised that, okay, I had a bit of a funny turn at the Monganui Bluff campsite on the second day on 90 Mile Beach. And that was a bit of a, you know, I was expecting that. I was expecting to feel like that. Probably I was expecting it to happen at the Twilight Beach campsite on the first night, but, you know, held off for a day, which was nice of it. But then after that, you know, it just sort of seemed to be okay. And I don't know whether it was just the fact that, you know, you get so focused on getting to one destination, you know, at the end of every single day, or whether it was the fact that I was really lucky that I fell into this really awesome group of people right at the start. And, you know, I quite often think to myself, what would have happened if I hadn't met, like, Julia, for example, or if I hadn't hiked around, you know, John, or been inspired by Haley, or, you know, all these people that I came across. And, like, it would have been a completely different experience. And I don't know that I would have carried on if I had been completely alone by myself on 90 Mile Beach. Now, of course, looking back at it in hindsight, that was probably never going to happen. You know, I was worried about being alone, but there are so many people starting every single day that, you know, if you're staying at those recommended campsites along the route in those first week or 2 weeks, you're going to run into people and you're going to make friends with people. And if you really want to, you'll stick with people. You know, the people who prefer to hike alone, the real solo hikers, the real independent people, they will separate themselves off anyway. So the people that you're left with are the ones that, you know, don't mind a little bit of company, and they may be there for a bit more of a social experience. So, I think that it made so much of a difference to me to have that group around me at the start. And as a result, I had a really supportive environment to build up that self-confidence without it feeling like it was such a massive thing for me to do. You know, like, I could fall back on these people. And, you know, if you're a through hiker, or even if you're not, even if you're just used to hiking around other people, you'll know that just by having or rather, the second that you meet somebody, you have an instant common ground with them. And, you know, I'd meet complete strangers, and whereas in my normal life, you know, I'd probably do everything I could to avoid them, out on the trail, it was like, oh, hi, you know, I'm Michelle, and this is where I've come from today. Like, you know, I'd just splurge all of this information on them about my day, you know, stuff that, you know, probably they didn't really need to know. But that's what everybody's like out there, because we're all sharing this experience. And, you know, you don't feel completely stupid for just saying, oh, you know, like, I freaking couldn't do with my undies today because they just kept getting up my butt and I'm just annoying me, you know, like stupid stuff like that. Not that they ever happen, but personal stuff, or maybe slightly unusual stuff like that you wouldn't normally talk to other people about, all of a sudden you're talking about. I mean, you know, pooping in the woods, that's a really great subject. You know, if you wouldn't normally say to somebody, oh yeah, I had to just get off trail a second ago and go and dig a hole so I could go poop because I just couldn't hold it any longer. But on trail, it's like, yeah, had to do that today. And, you know, chances are somebody else is going to say, oh yeah, I had to do that the other day too. And that's how you build common ground and confidence. Back to your question, that was a long way around. So do I feel like it's improved since then? Well, I felt all this confidence on the trail, and like, if you'd asked me that question when I got off the trail at Island Bay down in Wellington, I would have said, yes, I am a much more confident person today than I was 80 days ago. And that was totally true. And I felt like I could do anything. and I'd had time to think about some things, and I had a rough plan in place for what I wanted to do. And then life happened. You know, you get off the trail and you get back to normal life, and you realize that, oh yeah, there are bills to pay, and you know, I can't just rely on the money I've put into my bank account as a savings buffer anymore. Like, that money's now run out and it has to be replenished. And that means going back to a job that perhaps you don't particularly enjoy. And, you know, I think what happened with me was that life happened really quickly. And the effect of that was that it knocked my confidence back to where it was. In fact, probably even back further than where it was before I started. And that was a really big thing to try and adjust to. But one area that it didn't knock my confidence in was hiking. And you might think that that was a good thing, but I found that it wasn't, because about 3 weeks after I got home from the trail, I went out and did a hike with Mum down in the national park. And we did the Waihohonu Hut track. So we went out to the hut for the night, but that involved crossing a river. And it was quite a powerful river. Like, if you're down in the national park region, which is an alpine region, it's all snow melt coming off of the mountains, and as a result, it's obviously cold, but it's also quite powerful. And we had to cross this river, and I remember standing on the banks there thinking, you know, like, I feel like I can get across this river, but I just don't know whether I'm making a sensible decision here because I want to look confident and look strong to Mum, or whether this is one of those scenarios where I need to turn around to myself and say, actually, you don't really know what you're doing and we need to bail back to the car. But yeah, potentially there I was a little overconfident. And I think, you know, you need to be a bit conscious of that, especially if you are a beginner when you start like me, because I got off trail thinking, you know, like I'd gone from beginner to expert. When in actual fact, I haven't gone from beginner to expert. All I did was walk 1,700 kilometers. And okay, I learned a lot of things along the way, and there are things that I did along the way that I would never have thought I would have done, and you know, potentially dangerous things and stuff like that. But you know, I'm not an expert, and I think you have to force yourself to be a bit humble about things like that, because otherwise you put yourself into situations in the backcountry that you probably shouldn't be putting yourself in until you do have a bit more experience. So yeah, I'm just trying to, whenever I'm out hiking now, I try to be a little bit confident about, or a little bit conscious about that. So yeah, oh yeah, South Island is much worse for sandflies. There you go. Yeah. Oh yeah, Queen Charlotte. Oh God, I forgot about that. Yeah, I really noticed them on the Queen Charlotte. They were awful there. You know, at campsite every night, we could barely even sit outside our tents, and it was beautiful. At the Schoolhouse Bay campsite, beautiful, beautiful sunset, and I wanted to sit there and watch it, but we were just getting eaten alive. So yeah, that was awful. Awful. Oh, we've got a new person here, Ion PLGR. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that all in one word or not, but love your videos. Thank you. Thank you. That's awesome. I love it when people love my videos, because I don't. I heard that for long distance hiking, you need to buy boots or shoes 1 to 2 sizes bigger than you usually wear. What was this the case for you? So I had size 8.5. I think they were in the Ultra Lone Peaks, but they were the Lone Peak 3.5s. And I have heard that those particular shoes run small in comparison to some of the other later or earlier models of the Lone Peaks. So I would assume probably that if I were to go out and buy another pair of Lone Peaks right now, which I'm planning on doing very shortly, then I would probably have to buy a 9, and I usually wear an 8. So, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like, when I was watching all of the YouTube videos and things that I watched before I started out, it seemed like most people were sort of starting off with a slightly bigger shoe, maybe half a size or something. And then over the course of their hike, obviously, they were saying that their feet were sort of flattening out, which obviously makes them longer. So then they would have to swap to shoes with bigger sizes at the same time. But I didn't notice that. maybe I just didn't walk far enough. Because 1,700 kilometers, it's only about 1,000 miles, and yeah, maybe it just wasn't long enough for my feet to really start flattening out. I didn't notice in my Lone Peaks that my toes were starting to get a bit too close to the edge, but that doesn't mean that they didn't flatten out a little bit. I did. Like when I got my boots shipped down to me in Wellington after I'd realised that the Lone Peaks were pretty well shot, I remember putting so I had my Injinji liner socks on, and then I had my Smart Wool socks on over the top of that. And I did notice that like my boots felt really tight, and to the point where I had to take off my Smart Wool socks because they were just too tight for me, and I ended up just wearing liner socks all the way down to Island Bay. So perhaps, maybe my feet had grown a little bit, or maybe it was just that by that point I was so used to having so much room in the Lone Peaks that the Keen boots just felt uncomfortable at that point. I mean, they were just uncomfortable regardless. But yeah, it was, I don't know. I think the important thing is to get a shoe that is comfortable for you, and make sure that you have left a little bit of room in it, because you might want to put 2 pairs of socks on rather than just your one. I mean, I personally, after having used the 2 sock system with the Injinji socks and having not gotten one single blister on all of my 1,700 kilometers until I switched into my boots, I would definitely say, just get a shoe that is comfortable to you, but don't do what I've seen a lot of people doing and buy yourself 3 pairs of shoes before you start, because I just feel like that's expense that potentially is not going to be recoverable, because what happens if your if your foot does spread? What happens then? Then you've got 2 pairs of shoes sitting there that you can't use. So, and I think generally speaking, you should be switching out every 1,000 kilometers or so. That's a good place to be switching out. I pushed mine to 1,700, and I'm pretty sure I shouldn't have. And the other reason why perhaps I didn't notice anything was because I was wearing those insoles all the way from Kirikiri too. And perhaps maybe because they had arch support in it, perhaps maybe that stopped my feet from spreading out too far. It's a shame I couldn't really take advantage of the zero drop on the Ultra Lone Peak more than I did, but yeah, I'm definitely still getting that heel pain. I don't even know if it's plantar fasciitis anymore. I'm wondering whether it's Achilles pain. I don't know. It's right at the bottom of my foot, right up at the heel, sort of just around the bottom of the heel. I don't get anything around my ankle or at the back of my leg, but yeah, it definitely aches there. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question anyway. Did I manage to see the bioluminescent algae in Schoolhouse Back? Well, now I'm disappointed. I didn't even know that was a thing. Oh, now I need to go back there. Maybe it just wasn't there on the day that I was there, but oh gosh, no, I wish I'd seen it. I love stuff like that. But yeah, I just must have been too knackered. I was too worried about the goats or whatever coming around my tent at night time. But gosh, if you did and you've got pictures, I would love to see those. I would love to. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when I go back to do the South Island, I didn't really have any desire to go and re-hike kilometers that I've already hiked. But the more I think about it, the more I'm thinking that, yes, I will start from the very top again and do the whole Queen Charlotte track again. So I'll probably get an opportunity to see them then. I was just going to pick up from where I left off. But yeah, maybe I'll do that. Don't know. We will see. Okay, got some other questions here. What's it like in New Zealand for hiking, especially the Te Araroa post-COVID? Yeah, it's different, and I think we're all sort of just getting used to this new normal at the moment, and we have to be really conscious of the fact that we've only been in level 2 for I don't even know. Is it a week or is it 2? Must be 2 weeks by now. I don't know. And that's where we've really been able to get back into the overnight hikes. So yeah, but what I have heard is that, again, I should give the backstory because not all of you might know it, but so under level 2, we are allowed to go out overnight hiking to huts and stay at huts because they have been closed up until now. But, you know, obviously they're saying there shouldn't be more than 10 people in a hut. Well, that was until today. Today we're now allowed to have gatherings of up to 100 people, apparently. But until now, yeah, it's been, you can't have more than 10 people in one place at one time. And, you know, you have to wipe down all the benches and everything. You have to be conscious of your space, and you shouldn't really be sleeping right next to somebody that you don't know in the hut, etc., etc. So when I was out on the Tama Lakes track last weekend, there were a lot of people out on that track going out to the Waihohonu hut because it's quite a nice walk, and the two tracks sort of are in one, and then it tees off to go out to the hut. And I saw so many posts on Monday and Tuesday up on the Facebook tramping forums to say that people had stayed in Waihohonu hut last weekend, and it was basically 100% full. I think it's a 25 or 28 bunk hut, and they reckoned that there was about 25 people there, all cramped into one space, obviously. And this sort of, you know, it's a good debate, probably. It's one that I have tried not to engage in on Facebook because I seem to get yelled at a lot when I express my opinion on Facebook. But, you know, we've sort of been debating here whether it's a good idea to just transition all of these huts to a booking system. You know, the hut system in New Zealand is a bit strange because they allocate certain huts as bookable huts, and generally they're sort of the more front country huts. And, you know, those are the ones that people are more likely to be visiting on the weekends. And so they put this booking system in place, I guess, to make it easier for people to be able to tell whether a hut is going to be full, so that, you know, when they go out to these places, they know that they're going to get a bed. There are other reasons as well, I'm sure, but that seems to be the main one. But then the backcountry huts, you know, the ones that don't necessarily get visited so much, they're not on the booking system. So you can end up with situations, as happens a lot on the Te Araroa Trail, because of the fact that there are so many people hiking it at once, where you have like a 4 or a 6 or a 10 bunk hut, and, you know, just randomly 2 or 3 groups of people decide that they want to hike into that hut at the weekend. And so, of course, this is why, you know, Department of Conservation and Mountain Safety Council and all those people say to you, you know, be prepared. And being prepared means, even if you're going to a hut, make sure you take a tent, because you might not be able to get a bed at the hut. But I just feel like, you know, if they made it a booking system, or even if there was just some sort of an online intentions system where you could just say, look, I'm thinking about going out to this hut this weekend. Like, for me personally, I'd much prefer to go onto a website like that where somebody's logged their intention. And also that kind of functions as a safety thing as well. And, you know, at least get an idea of how many other people are potentially going to be going there. Because if it's not an urgent thing for me, or if it's not something that's time sensitive, maybe I just decide to postpone it to a later date. But yeah, there were a few people who had some strong opinions to that particular suggestion when I mentioned it. So, I mean, there's the fact that a lot of these are emergency shelters, and so you don't want to have to book for that. And, like, obviously I'm not suggesting that you would have to book if you're in an emergency situation, or, you know, if you found yourself in an emergency situation, that you wouldn't be able to stay at the hut. Like, common sense, you know. But one person said, you know, like, there are so many different times where I've gone out on a trip and then had to change my plans and ended up at a different hut. I hadn't considered that, so it's never happened to me. But I sort of was a little bit flabbergasted with that too, because, you know, is that because you haven't prepared properly Or is it just because of weather and you've had to go to another hut, you know, because those are two very different scenarios. And I sort of got the impression that maybe it was a spur of the moment thing where, you know, they just decided they didn't, or they couldn't walk to that hut and needed to go to another one. But, you know, of course there are extenuating circumstances, and I'm not suggesting that just because you haven't booked the hut doesn't mean you can stay there. But yeah, there's got to be something easier that they can do. So these questions are both from Scorpio Design, because you asked such great questions, and I think they're really quite relevant. So I thought I would answer them. Oh, firstly, quickly, you asked whether there was a New Zealand compatible brand of USB charger that I can recommend. I assume, you know, you mean like the charging battery packs. In short, no, I don't know. I mean, I assume there's probably some sort of large capacity Belkin charger that you could use, and generally speaking, they're sold here everywhere. And you'd probably be able to pick one up relatively quickly here. But like, in my experience, I don't know that the brand of the charger necessarily matters so much. Like, you could potentially use one from overseas. All you need to do is get a plug to plug it in to the main socket here. So if it's a USB, like, you're going to have a USB cable on one end, and then you're going to have the other end, either USB or USB-C or whatever it is, to plug it into your charging block. Well, I don't mean charging block. You know what I mean. I mean the battery pack. Oh gosh. But yeah, the actual wall chargers themselves. So what did I use? I ended up splashing out on a Signet wall charger for USB, but it cost me like $100 or whatever. And I bought it because it was a power delivery wall charger. And then I forgot to buy a power delivery charging cable. So I carried this massive charging plug for basically the whole way, and I really didn't need it. So I use, like, if I was doing it again, I'd probably just use, I've got an Apple wall plug thing. It would help if I knew the names of these things. But I have an Apple wall plug that just has one USB slot in the back of it. And that would be fine for me to just plug that into to charge up my battery bank. On the North Island, I didn't need to charge anything more than once. So there were only, like, obviously I had my phone to charge, and then I had my battery bank to charge, and then I had my Garmin to charge. And, like, generally speaking, I could always work it that I only needed to charge one of those things when I got into town. In fact, I very rarely really used the battery pack on the North Island. It was only through some of the more wildernessy type sections, and you know, there were not really any sections where I had to use it for more than 3 or 4 days in a row, so I never depleted the battery. So yeah, I could generally alternate those whenever I got into town. But my phone, yeah, I mean, it would be handy to probably have a wall charger that had 2 slots in it. And if that's the case, I would say probably, you know, buy a Belkin one when you get here, or get a Belkin one before you arrive and bring it with you. And if it's one of these ones where you can change out the pins, because some of them, or a lot of brands, are doing that these days, you know, you can sort of slide out one set of plugs and put in another one, then you could just buy a New Zealand pin. But yeah, I mean, you know, you can find wall chargers anywhere. I think for the most part, if you're just using it for 3 months, most of the real cheap options that you'll find in any electronics store are going to last you for 3 months, and then you can get rid of it before you go home. But yeah, in my experience, I like the Belkin stuff, and it's not too expensive. So, you know, you're probably looking at, I don't know, off the top of my head, I'd say you're looking at between $20 and $30, probably not even that for a wall plug. With a couple of USB slots in the back. So, but have a look if you're on the internet. Take a look at the electronics companies' websites. So you've got Noel Leeming, and you've got JB Hi-Fi, and there's also a company called PB Tech. And those are probably the 3 places I'd suggest you have a look for what the options are. Right. Okay, there's only a limited number of post-restaurant locations along the trail. Do I know of any alternatives or additional locations which would accept and hold a bounce box or resupply package? So I kind of covered this in my resupply video. So the situation with the post-restaurant is that, yes, they are generally only in the larger centres. And I think I counted them up. I think there's one in Kaitaia. Was it Kerikeri? Either Kerikeri or Paihia. Whangarei, but you're going to have to get off trail quite a substantial way to get to that one. Auckland, obviously. I think Wanganui. Can't remember. And then basically Wellington. So, yeah, not all of them are on trail and not all of them are going to be easy to get to. And like, you know, I don't have a very good relationship with New Zealand Post. I just don't like them. I actually think it's quite funny that a couple of weeks ago they came out and said that, oh, actually, you know, postal services in New Zealand are quite important because of the situation we're in with coronavirus right now, and people do need the post. This is after like many, many years of them slowly cutting back all of the postal services in New Zealand and disincentivizing people from using the post by raising the prices through the roof. Like if I want to send 2 magazines to my friend over in Colorado, it costs me the equivalent of about 30 or 40 New Zealand dollars to get it there. So, you know, that's probably about 20 US dollars. What would that be? Yeah, 15 or 20 pounds, which is ridiculous. I mean, I'm sure the situation is the same in other countries too, but yeah, New Zealand Post and me, we don't mesh very well. And also, like, Mum had issues sending my resupply boxes in New Zealand. You know, after she sent 1 or 2, she turned up at the post office with another one, and she must have just had a not very nice person serve her at the counter, because when she said what was in it and just, you know, told them what she'd been telling them all along and said it's food, this lady almost refused to take the package and send it because it was food and it wasn't commercially packaged and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, so I nearly didn't get that resupply box. So alternatives or additional locations. Like there are so many. And what I did was I would just ring ahead and I would ask people whether it was okay to send a box. You know, it doesn't work the same as I think it probably works in the US, where I think you can sort of just send your box there and you don't really have to give them advance notice. In New Zealand, you're going to have to give advance notice. So like for my first couple of resupply boxes, in fact, I think for the first 3 or 4, before I left, I actually rang the places that I wanted to send them. And they were, you know, backpackers or hostels or motels or holiday parks. Like I got a lot of mine sent to holiday parks. And I just made sure that it was okay for them to hold a box. I asked them, you know, if there was any particular way that they needed me to label it so that it was held in the right place. But again, because the trail is so new at the moment, not a lot of people are sending boxes, and so they're quite happy to hold on to that for them. I don't know what will happen actually as the trail gets a little bit older, because you know, maybe they won't be quite happy when they realize that many boxes are turning up and they're basically having to dedicate different rooms to storing people's boxes. But yeah, I would just say ring ahead and look for those places like the holiday parks and the motels. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what your particular plan is for accommodation. If you're planning on freedom camping along the way, then I think you're going to be a little bit stuck, and probably your best bet then would be to send them to Trail Angels. But yeah, I mean, if you're sending a box ahead, I'm assuming that, you know, you're going to be probably staying in an establishment of some kind. And, you know, you might not be paying for them to hold on to that box, but you'll be paying to stay a night at that place anyway. And generally, you know, I would reiterate that again, like I did in that video. If you are sending a box somewhere, it's just courtesy to stay a night with them. So On the South Island, it's a little bit different. There aren't quite as many places to send the boxes along the way, and certainly in that first section of the top of the South Island, Boyle Village in particular charges quite a lot of money to hold on to boxes. I think they're a little bit, they can be a bit harsh to deal with as well. And then there's a couple of other places. I think Arthur's Pass Village, the place that you send boxes to there, they also do charge to hold boxes. That's just the Kiwi way. It's kind of annoying. It kind of annoys me that they charge to hold boxes too, but you know, there are circumstances and I understand those, and you know, these are only small places, so I get that, but it sort of also smacks of them just wanting to make a little bit of extra money on the side. But anyway, so that was the post-restaurant question. And then also you were quite keen to know about thoughts on using a poncho on the trail. I think you're quite keen to use a poncho, and so I'm going to try and give an objective opinion, because I have to say my opinion is just don't bother. It depends on what kind of a poncho you're using. I mean, I think you did actually mention before that you have quite a heavy duty one. You know, we're not just talking about the lightweight, thin plasticky ponchos, because they wouldn't last 5 minutes on the trail. So yeah, if it was a little bit more heavy duty, then fine. I mean, I guess advantages are you're going to have more breathability. Obviously, you know, it's easier to take on and off. You've got the ability, if it's long enough and big enough, to throw it over your pack as well. So it sort of acts like a rain cover. You know, I'm sure that there are uses and advantages to having a poncho. And I think, you know, if I had a poncho like that, I would probably use it. But to me, it would have to be worth the weight disadvantage, because I'd imagine that a poncho like that is probably going to weigh quite a bit. Having said that, my rain jacket weighed quite a bit. I mean, I think it was somewhere between 250 and 300 grams, maybe a bit more than that, which is quite heavy for a rain jacket, but I never got wet really. And I had, like I said, 2 days hiking in absolutely pouring torrential rain. And whereas most people were sort of getting damp on the inside within about 30 minutes or an hour if they were lucky, and then basically ending up soaked by the end of the day anyway, I really only started to notice that I was getting damp after a couple of hours, and I never got soaked underneath. You know how sometimes it can bleed through on the underside. So obviously, you know, you have to think about the fact that no rain jacket is going to be fully waterproof whilst you have a pack on, because the areas where your pack touches the rain jacket is obviously going to cause pressure points, and then the waterproofing isn't necessarily going to work the same. But, you know, I had my Macpac Traverse jacket with the 20,000 millimeter hydrostatic head, and I didn't have any problems with getting wet. I felt cold when it was raining and I had only that jacket on, but I wasn't really wet. A little bit damp maybe, but not wet. So yeah, so I suppose it depends. If you have a poncho that's nice and lightweight, oh, there you go, you put it there for me. Weighs 330 grams. Okay, so that's roughly probably equivalent to my rain jacket. Yeah, so maybe that's a good option. And like I said, they do have advantages. Maybe it's something I just need to try. Maybe I just need to bite the bullet and give it a go. So you can send me a link to whatever you're using and maybe I'll pick one up. Here we go. Well done. You've just convinced me. Maybe I need to try a poncho. Oh dear. Okay. George has asked a question. Okay. Could you have been comfortable with a lighter quilt? That is another really good question. Gosh, we're all having great questions tonight. Yes, probably. Probably I could have. But, and there is a but, there were, and okay, I can only count them on one hand, but there were 2 nights on the trail where I was really glad that I had my, what have I got? I don't know, 10 degree. I've got a 10 degree, 10 degree quilt. And that was up in Waikari when I stayed with the Trail Angel Cheryl up there. And the second one was down at the Tongariro Holiday Park on the day before I did the Tongariro crossing. those 2 nights were the coldest nights that I have had, or that I had on trail. And the first one was in not even mid-November, early November. So, okay, you're not quite into the full depth of summer at that point. And the second one was just before Christmas, which, you know, should be nice hot temperatures. But of course, we were 400 or 500 meters above sea level at that point. And that was the day that I actually woke up to ice on the outside of my tent in the middle of summer. So, you know, I should have thought about that really, being down in the national park at that time of year. Well, no, not at that time of year. You wouldn't expect ice at that time of year normally. But apparently, you know, it does get like that. So, but if I had had a lighter quilt on those 2 nights, I would have been quite uncomfortable. I mean, you know, I wouldn't have been dead. It's not like it was that cold, but yeah, I mean, at Waikari in particular, like I was restless the whole night because it was so cold, and I do tend to sleep cold. And I guess, you know, that's the point. Questions about quilts and things like that are really quite subjective because some people are cold sleepers and other people aren't. And, you know, if you're a cold sleeper, I would definitely say get the slightly heavier, you know, quilt. But if you are a slightly warmer sleeper or whatever, then you might want to just get a lighter weight quilt. I am thinking about getting another lightweight one and potentially taking it with me on the South Island. I will definitely be taking it with me if I eventually get to do the Camino. There you go, spoiler alert, because that's what I'm planning on doing, hopefully next year sometime. And if I do that, I would like to pick up a lighter quilt and just see what it's like. Obviously, I'll be sleeping inside most of the time. But yes, I forget what I was going to say. I was going to say something else there, but I forgot. Yeah, it depends on you. It just really depends on you. And I think for the fact that even my quilt, being a 10-degree one, was so much lighter than so many other people's sleeping bags and quilts that I came across, you know, like it, to me, it just made sense to have the heavier, warmer quilt. There is one lady that I know of, an older lady, not really old, but an older lady, who told me that she just used her sleeping bag liner the entire way. I don't know how she did that, but she reckoned that was perfectly fine for her. So, you know, I guess it's just each to their own. And yeah, I think I just tend to sleep cold. So that really wasn't going to work for me. But yeah. Oh, Scorpio design, they call it ultralight. Nice. Oh, the old ultralight debate, huh? I'd love to be ultralight. I don't know that's going to happen. I want to try and test it on the South Island. Actually, that's a good point. So yeah, I mean, that video I released today about my pack. So I am thinking about switching to a different pack for the South Island. Although probably what I will end up doing is using the Art Call through the Richmond Ranges, because there's a 10-day section there where there is no resupply. So that's 10, actually, I think it's an 8-day section, but you really need to carry 10 days worth of food. So I'm potentially going to need a bigger pack to carry all of that. But then once I get through the Richmond Ranges, I'm thinking about switching it out. So hopefully this year, all funds and things permitting, I'll be able to pick up a new pack. I already have an idea of what I want. I'm not going to spoil that now though. And then I'll be able to start looking at really getting my base weight down quite low. I am even thinking about cold soaking on the South Island. I've just said that out loud now. Now I can't go back on it. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know that that's going to fly, quite frankly. I do like my hot meals at the end of the day. And more than that, I like my cup of tea in the morning. Like, that's what I look forward to when I'm out on the trail. But yeah, we'll just see how that goes. That's my plan anyway. Any news for my data recovery? Yes, lots of news. Yeah, because I forget, you guys, not all of you are patrons, and I did update my patrons the other day on this. So yes, here is my phone. This is the one that went into the river. It's not completely usable really, but it's going to have to make do for now because yeah, funds are tight, quite frankly. But I managed to get all of the photos and the videos from the river, so I am stoked, absolutely stoked. I haven't rushed to start editing that video together, just because firstly, I'm a little bit worried about accidentally deleting it all again. That's not going to happen. It's backed up in like 5 different places now. But yeah, I've just been busy trying to get these post-hike reviews and stuff out because I am getting lots of questions from people now, especially people who want to start next year, asking for advice and things. So I wanted to try and get a few more of these review videos out. But and because of that, I haven't really had too much time. And like I said, I've had to go back to work like 30 hours a week as well. So at the moment, I am struggling to find the time to get videos and things together. But I am hoping that, well, definitely by the end of June, that video will be out. And I don't know whether it's going to be one video or whether it's going to be 2. I might try and squeeze it all into one. But yeah, there's some pretty cool footage from that section. Some pretty neat photos as well, which I'll be putting up on Instagram. So if you're not following me already on Instagram, go and check me out there. And then yeah, you can look forward to having the Wanganui River Journey videos as well. And like, what an amazing section. You know, I have to say, I think that was definitely one of my highlights of the North Island. And that is quite funny because before I started, I was petrified of it. You know, that was definitely the thing I was least looking forward to. But now, you know, I'm just so glad that we did it. And even the horrible days after Papariki, which are like the 2 days on the river that are just awful. You know, there's no scenery really to look at. And that's where we ditched. We ditched just after Papariki. Even looking back on that section now, you know, just so many. I think that's where Dad and I really bonded, because after we came out of the boat and we'd had that pretty awful experience, and after we'd pulled over on the river a bit further down and I'd burst into tears and just basically said, I don't think I can do this anymore. I came very close to quitting on that day. And so did Dad too, I think. You know, and after we'd then paddled the boat into what felt like 100-kilometre-an-hour headwinds for most of the next day, and to the point where, you know, we were getting turned 360 degrees on the river. Because the wind would, you know, if we weren't facing directly into the wind would catch the bow slightly and then it would just push you. And of course, once it pushed you, either you were in the water, which didn't happen again, we were quite good at staying upright, or you just ended up facing the completely wrong way. And, you know, on that day before we got into Wanganui, we were in the boat facing the wrong way down the river, holding onto the bank at the side, which was basically just a cliff. For 15-20 minutes, because the wind was so strong we couldn't turn ourselves around. So and after that we ended up getting out of the boat. We got it up onto a little like stone beach, managed to finally paddle to the stone beach and got out of the boat and just dragged it along the shoreline for about 500 meters because we could not paddle up the river. But you know, now those are the stories that we tell everybody, and you know, those are the ones that we look back on and say, oh, you know, remember that time when we had to pull the boat up the river because we couldn't paddle across it. Yeah, one of my favorite sections. I was nervous about it, and I'm so glad that we did it. But you know, we had perfect weather, and you know, we didn't get caught in floods like a lot of people did, and we didn't have to paddle down the river in the pouring rain, so it could have been a lot different. It's been awesome talking to you guys. Thank you for all the questions. If you do have any more questions, you know, I'm always here to answer them. I love talking about this stuff. So drop me a question in a comment somewhere, or like I said, if you want sort of a more personalized approach, or if you want my opinion on your gear, or you're preparing to do a long distance hike or something, I do gear shakedown sessions with people on Patreon as well. So if you want a bit more of a personalized experience, go and check me out there. But otherwise, stay safe, everybody, because that is the most important thing at the moment, whether that is coronavirus related or just if you are getting back out into the backcountry. Be safe, be prepared and just take care of yourselves, because that's all important. Thank you guys all so much. Thanks, Scorpio. Thank you, Aiden. Nice to see you all. And yeah, we'll catch up next time. I'm looking forward to having the next one now. All right, have a good evening or morning or wherever you are. And we'll see you next time. Bye, guys. Bye.